Hi, this is Ron Ball, and I want to welcome you back to Choose Greatness, your key to a happier, better, greater life. It's even more of a fun life because when you experience God's success in your life, there is a freedom, there is a liberty, there is an energy, there's a lift that can actually make your life worth living. God wants to do great things in you, through you, with you, especially with your family. And I know that you as a mom or a dad, many of you watching at home, you have a great desire for the best life possible for your children. And we are living in a culture that works against that, a culture that promotes selfishness, a culture that encourages entitlement, a culture that teaches your children that it's all about them, it's all me, me, me. Well, you have an opportunity to expand your kids out of that into a life where they serve God and serve people and have a fulfillment that is absolutely amazing. Now, I have a guest on today, and you heard him on our last program, who has actually lived that kind of a life. He's seen this in real people. He's seen people change through doing business. So my guest, Ken Woods, is back with us. Welcome back, Ken.
Thanks, Ron.
And I know you loved him on the last program, and I want you to do what I've already asked you to do previously, and you know this is coming. I want you to get on your social media, start texting, start calling, alert as many people as possible about this program. Just say, hey, Choose Greatness is on. Are you watching? And tell them to get on board right now. Now, I loved what Ken said about his mom and dad on our last program because he described parents, a mom and dad, who intentionally taught him great lessons. That reminded me, Ken, of what my wife Amy and I at least tried to do with our children, Allison and Jonathan. Now, I've mentioned Allison and Jonathan before, and most of you have heard this, that my daughter Allison is the youngest state elected official in the United States. She is the chief financial officer of the state of Kentucky, bankruptcy attorney, moved into a political career that just took off like a rocket. And my son Jonathan, her brother, is now in his first year of law school. And everything we've taught them, we've done it on purpose. We put them in front of people on stage, probably at some of your events. When they were both 8 years of age, we started getting them in front of people so they would become comfortable talking in front of large crowds. They would not be intimidated by that. Well, when you talked about your mom and dad, I was inspired. I was reminded of all that, and they did that for you. So I think there's something about the business model we both have been experienced with that encourages that. And I want to ask you a question, Ken. It's a good question. You work administratively, organizationally, with a whole collection of Amway businesses that work cooperatively together. And you have a lot of Latino, Hispanic members of these organizations who are building businesses,
Yep.
who are starting, some of them with no knowledge at all. I'd like your observations of what you see in that community. That's a particular kind of person, and they're becoming a dynamic part of America.
They are.
And I'm very excited. Those of you watching, many of you have a Hispanic heritage yourself, and I want to tell you, you are really adding to America. You are such a dynamic part of American culture. But I want to know from your experience in building Amway businesses with a lot of these individuals, what do you see? I mean, what do you like about them? What encourages you about these individuals?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, Ron, is the entrepreneurial mindset. You know, for the most part, when people say someone who's Latino or Hispanic, they're thinking they're first or second generation here in the U.S. And, you know, my experience has been one where these are people who are hungry for success and hungry to build a better life for themselves and their families, which is exactly what my family was looking for, you know. So that's the starting point of what I see. And, you know, I don't like to characterize a certain group of people because to me their families just like my wife and I and our kids.
People are people.
People are people.
Right.
And they have the same dreams, hopes, and desires and the same issues and problems as everybody else. And so when you start from that perspective, you realize, gosh, we're really all very much alike. Sure, we have different background, different culture. Maybe you know, somebody could be Mexican or Dominican, Puerto Rican, Colombian, wherever, you know, someplace, Guatemala, so who knows, someplace from Central, South America, the Caribbean, and all of them have different cultural backgrounds. But the biggest thing that I would say for all of them looking for success, right, and looking to move ahead, and what I've seen in working with a lot of them is that they need to become good learners. Right? They need to learn to step outside of their comfort zone, which many of them already have if they live in the U.S., because can you imagine how difficult that is to show up, sometimes not speak the language and have to learn it, and begin a new life, whether they were professionals or otherwise. You know, a lot of, I find it interesting, I bump into a lot of people who were professionals in their previous country. They might have been doctors or attorneys or something like that, and they come here and, you know, they have to start over because the things don't transfer over.
And they actually do it.
And they do that. And so what I see is that for them, they have the added difficulty of language barriers and customs, you know, that they're learning. But they are willing to work hard and willing to change and willing to do whatever it takes to move ahead. And you know, it's fun to see.
Well, you mentioned the word culture several times. What do you see in Latin culture in general that's a real positive?
Very family-oriented. Most have Christian faith backgrounds. And I think that comes from the Americas and from the Caribbean. And so they are already used to more of a Judeo-Christian background that, you know, is already found in the U.S. in many ways. But that family background means that they are not afraid to get their hands dirty, right? They understand that life is not easy and that we all have families and we all have interpersonal issues, right, within our families, and that can be worked through because family is important, and they're willing to do that.
So that's a commitment they already have.
Yes.
Well, that's been exciting to me because, as you know, I've had the very wonderful opportunity to speak to a number of business conventions that are filled with Spanish-speaking individuals. And it's been a great experience for me because I have learned to love these individuals. And we are made in the image of God together, as you're right. There are cultural differences, but there are human similarities.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great emphasis that you make because we want to embrace one another. America is made up of multiple ethnic and people groups.
Yes.
And we become Americans. What do you think there is in the idea of being an American? Not just the economic opportunity, but the idea of being an American that draws people here. What about America is attractive?
They're looking for freedom. They're looking for independence. They're looking to live in a culture and in a society where there's no glass ceiling. And that's not just financially, that's socially, and an opportunity also for them to have their kids live a life better than what they could have lived maybe in a home country.
Well, now, give our audience just a quick overview. You mentioned some countries already. You mentioned
Sure.
Dominican, DR, you mentioned different Puerto Rico. Can you just give a quick, you don't have to name all of them, but just give our viewers an idea of how many countries you and your organization works with?
Gosh, right now, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Venezuela, Uruguay, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Aruba, Curacao, all over the place. You know, U.S. territories like Puerto Rico.
Right. Well, the reason I wanted you to do that is I wanted our viewers to see the reach of your business and the extent of the opportunity that you are involved with.
Yep.
Let me ask you another question. This is very important for all of you watching because I know that many of you watching have a desire for more money. Now, I know that doesn't sound very spiritual, but I learned a long time ago that if you are financially stressed, it's hard to concentrate on anything else. It's a primary need. And I'm not replacing spiritual commitment with money. That's not at all what I intend. What I'm saying is, unless you are imbalanced financially, you can't concentrate on anything else. So do you see again, in this case, the Amway business, and by the way, this is not a program promoting the Amway business. We're not having Ken on here to sign you up.
Right,
Okay, I'm sure
right.
he'd be glad to talk to you.
That's right.
But it's a voluntary business. We're just using Amway because you have experience with it, and I have experience with it as an example of how businesses develop, how opportunities develop. What I'd like you to address just for a moment is, can you give just a quick, simple overview that if you had a new couple, let's say that they came from Mexico and they're in the United States and they are introduced to the Amway business, and you have an opportunity to teach them how to develop a business, how would you get them started? What would you do? What would you consider important for them to do to build independent financial freedom?
So, there's a lot of things to talk about, and I won't go specifically into the Amway business, but just talk more as an
general
entrepreneur.
Principles.
Yeah,
yes.
General principles. They need to look at a couple things. One, they need to understand that it's a process, that things don't happen.
Be patient.
Be patient. That understand things don't happen overnight. Number two, they need to understand that financially, they're now, if they're interested in business, they are now making themselves into a business entity, a company, right? Which means outflow and inflow of money, both sides are important, and both sides can be controlled. And they have to think differently about that.
So they have to get a bit more organized in their thinking.
They do. And that doesn't necessarily mean right away getting a business professional, or consultant in there. I'm talking just in terms of learning to study, learning to understand what they don't know well. They have to understand they're going to have to hustle, right? That they need to get out there and work. That if you want to be successful at anything, whether you're native-born American or you're from Colombia, you're going to have to work hard. That nothing's easy. That the U.S. is full of a lot of opportunity, but it requires effort.
There's a lot of money here, but it takes effort to tap into that, basically.
Absolutely.
Well, now keep going.
So another thing that I would think is just as important as all of that stuff is mentorship. That what I find in our business and what I see is the importance and value of creating good relationships with people that are smarter than you are, that have perhaps been where you have been, and that can speak into your life. And that is critical.
So that goes back to your original point of teachability.
It does.
I mentioned one of the big business builders on our last show, Bill Britt, and you know that name because he was a giant in the Amway business. He gave a fascinating example once that relates to what you're saying. I was in a room with him and he was explaining this. He said, imagine that you're driving down an interstate in North Carolina. That's where he was from. So that was his state of example. So he said, imagine you're driving down and you're just having a great time and you're listening to you've got your phone on and you're listening to your playlist, and suddenly you see blue lights behind you and you pull over. He said, that is a moment where you have to make a decision to submit to that person's authority. If not, you're in big trouble.
Yep.
You have to do that. You have to choose to do that. Now, the policeman who steps out of the car may be 20 years younger than you, but he still represents authority. You have to recognize that. Now, I wondered where Bill was going with this, and then he said this. This is so good. All of you listen to this. He said, the same thing is true with success. He said, the people who don't succeed are the people who don't listen to the authorities. They are stubborn. They think they know everything. They don't think they need to learn anything. They resist. But if you will do what you did with the policeman and submit to that and learn from that and listen to that authority, he said, it can totally make your world explode. You can actually begin to make money because there's somebody who knows what you don't know and you need to know it. Does that fit what you're saying?
Totally, totally. Because what happens is they point out your weaknesses, right, and hopefully in a loving way, but they help you to see what you don't necessarily see. What I wouldn't see about myself.
An outside look at you.
Yes, and so you have this situation where you have somebody else that you trust, that you're willing to listen to, that has what you want in life, Maybe not all aspects, right?
Right.
You know, you might have different mentors for different situations, and they help you to see, gosh, you know what, I need to grow in this area, or gosh, I need to be more patient, and I have something I need to work toward. You know, and it's funny, I think the other thing that happens is you reach a point as you're developing successfully where you then begin mentoring other people too. And you begin to pass on what you learn
Right.
from your own personal
Which
growth.
is God's principle of giving. God recycles everything.
Yes.
So when you learn something, God's going to take that with your giving attitude and recycle it into the life of another person.
Absolutely.
That's mentoring.
Yep.
You reminded me of an experience I had in Mississippi years ago. I was speaking at a giant family camp, and there were thousands of people there. And after one of our evening sessions, I was confronted, and that's a good word, I was confronted by a man who was even bigger than you, Ken. I mean, this guy towered. He must have been like 6'8", big farmer, bulky, I mean, just a monster of a guy. And he was upset with me. He was very angry. His wife was there. She was very embarrassed by this. And he said, my wife wants me to talk to you, which he obviously did not want to do. And I said, well, you know, I backed up and I said, well, what does she want you to talk to me about? And he said, well, she thinks I need to listen to you on leading my family spiritually. But then he got right in my face and said, but I don't need this. I don't need to know what you say. And his wife was just she was kind of shaking her head, no, you do need it like this. And finally, he just towered over me and he said, so what have you got to say? And I said, well, are you leading your family in prayer? I mean, you're a man. Do you pray with your wife? No, why should I do that? Do you lead your wife in Bible study? Good grief, no. I mean, that was his whole approach. We went through this whole process, and finally, something just snapped inside of me. Maybe it was suicide, I don't know, but I looked at him and I said, you know what? If you're going to be a godly man with a godly family, you have to learn to like these things. You have to be teachable. You have to learn to like it. And he grumbled for a moment, and he came back to me about 30 minutes later. His wife must have talked to him, and he said, you know, I do need to learn this. Now, I actually had the opportunity to meet this couple again some months later, and God had transformed that man. I mean, you know, he started to do what we had taught him to do, and God just powerfully blessed it. So that ties into mentorship, doesn't it?
It does.
That not only do you need a mentor, you need a mentee.
Yes.
You need somebody who will be willing to listen. Am I right?
You're right. I think what happens is, let's use that as your example as an illustration. If somebody's unwilling to be teachable, then, you know, it doesn't matter who their teacher is. They're not ready. If they're not going to receive it, that's when it becomes overbearing, that's when it becomes preachy, that's when nothing's working. And you can just step back and you just have to be the example.
And it may not even be the mentor's fault.
It may not at all. But the other thing that happens is, and this is where having a good mentor is important, is they have the wisdom and experience, it doesn't matter their age, where they can speak into somebody's life and say, gosh, you know what, they can step back and not be personally offended and say, and recognize that maybe somebody's acting out of fear, right? They're very insecure about their leadership or their role in their family, and they're unsure what to do, and that, you know what, that's the starting point. And you know, we're all different, right? So we all come from different walks of life, and that's something else that's interesting within the Latin community. You never know, just like in the U.S. and from, you know, somebody who's born in the U.S., you never know somebody's background. So, you know, you have to learn to listen.
Got to take them where they are.
You do.
You know the name Dexter Yeager. He's for years been the biggest person in Amway. You know, we've mentioned him before. My first personal experience with him, other than speaking on a stage with him where I first met him in Alabama, but my first personal one-on-one with him was over money. And I was badly mismanaging money at that point in my life. I was racking up debt. I would wake up at 2 o'clock every morning, like an internal alarm clock went off. You'll appreciate this, Ken. I would wake up at 2 o'clock every morning and throw up because I was under such financial stress. I was worried about money. How would I pay my bills? Had a house payment I couldn't really afford. My wife was really worried. And I met Dexter, who had this huge Amway business. And very interesting, I prayed one night for God to give me a solution, an answer, something to fix my problem. And I still remember it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I just finished throwing up. Sorry, it's an ugly story. And suddenly the name Dexter Yeager just came in my mind. And I remember arguing with God and saying, God, I need an answer. I don't need Dexter, I need an answer. So please give me an answer, Dexter Yeager. So finally I caught on and I called him. It was after midnight. He answered and he arranged to see me 2 days later. Now it's very interesting. He didn't try to get me in the Amway business. He took me right where I was. He asked me a number of questions. He listened, like you just said, very carefully. And then he very lovingly wiped me out. He began to dissect all my bad financial patterns, and I had a lot of them. And you know what my reaction was? I arrogantly, stupidly got angry and didn't want to talk to him anymore. You know why? Because I was a man. I was running my own life. Well, I was running my own life, but I was doing a stupid, bad job of it. So after about 2 months, I went back to him and said, you know what? I was wrong. I humbled myself. That's what Bill Britt was talking about humbling yourself before the police officer, because you're trying to fix something. You're trying to solve something.
Sure.
And that's when I began to learn from him, and it changed everything. Everything. So would you agree with me that that is foundational to building success?
It is, and it's funny, so we all have some experiences like that, right? And so here you are, you know, you're talking about Hispanics or Latin community, and here you are in Anglo, right? And you had this attitude and this, you know, arrogance, maybe, right?
No,
At the
no
time.
maybe.
Yeah,
no
so
maybe.
there you go. And you know, you know, you see that in U.S. in English culture, right?
It's
in
cross-cultural.
But it is cross-culture, and you see that in the Latin community as well. There's an expectation in the Latin community, especially as a male, that you know you need to be in charge, and you need to be respected. And so people confuse this idea of disrespecting somebody with somebody needing to learn, or have some humility, or the ability to get some mentorship. You know, and this comes back to some of my experience from back in the military, when I was in the military, which would be, you know, and this is what a good mentor does, you know, you praise in public and you criticize in private.
Right.
Right? And so that you don't mess with people's egos, but you do need
You don't
sometimes to
needlessly
hear it.
embarrass them.
It's unnecessary, right? That just gets in the way of the message, unless it's all about you, right?
And then that's another problem.
And that's another issue. Absolutely.
That's well said. And I want all of you to really focus on what Ken has said. The reason I have Ken Woods on this program right now is because he has lived this life through his family, through his own experience, and the fact that he is now operating with all of these Amway Hispanic-oriented businesses.
Yep.
This is his experience. This is his world. He has worked with, I would guess, thousands of people in this opportunity. Would I be right?
Absolutely.
I mean, easily that. So he has seen everything. And he's seen it with his own parents, who built a giant Amway business, very successful. So that's why I have Ken on this program. I want him to explain to you what it takes. And I think God has actually surfaced a theme in this show. And the theme is humility. The theme is teachability. That seems to be the resounding message that you're giving us today, that you have to be teachable, and if you're not, if you're stubborn, then you are blocking your own success track. You're your own roadblock. You're in your own way. Would you agree with that?
Totally agree.
That is fundamental.
It is.
Now, I've got, boy, you know, I have 2 or 3 more questions to ask you. We're almost out of time. Can we do one more show?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Let's do it.
This is too good. You know what? Because, see, Ken is your son. Ken is your, I'm not doing gender bending, he's your daughter. Pardon me, you're not a woman, I know
Right.
that, and I don't expect you ever to be. What I'm saying is he represents your children. That's what I mean. He is here representing your children. What are you teaching your kids? How are you teaching them? Are you spoiling them? Hey, don't get mad at me, but I've got to ask, are you spoiling your children? Are you making them think the whole world revolves around them? When his mom and dad, Ken's mom and dad, made him work their Amway business, loading products, carrying stuff, he had to be a part of what they did. They didn't just say, oh, little Ken, you go play, we'll take care of it. You see, they didn't want him to be entitled. They wanted him to be not self-focused. They wanted him to be a giver and contribute to the family. Well, that's the thing you have to do for your children, and that will encourage the teachability we've been describing in this particular program. You know, I pray over the show, and I ask God to guide it. I mean, I make preparation, as you should do, and I pray over the preparation. But sometimes God just steps in, which we want him to do, and he gives something special. Well, I think that something special today is your emphasis on mentorship, on learning, on humility, on teachability. Now, to help you do that, I want to encourage you once again to go to choosegreatness.com. Now, there are many resources at choosegreatness.com. It's the website that is connected to this program. It is built for this program. There are all kinds of opportunities available. You can even watch Choose Greatness on that website. There are archived episodes if you've missed them. But I also want to encourage you to do two things today. Order the book, Choose Greatness. That is the intro to everything that you and your family need to know about a happy, successful, God-fulfilled life. It helps you to choose greatness. And then I want you to order the audio set, The Success Test, because there is an actual test. You're graded, but hey, it's fun, it's easy, don't be scared. It's a great way to understand what you need to focus on to build a greater life. It's all explained, it's all simple, and it's all very easy and powerful. It's your opportunity to get a greater life. So choosegreatness.com. God bless you. Tell your friends about this show. Tell everybody you know to tune in. Watch it on choosegreatness.com. And remember, whatever you do, choose greatness.